So I chose to look at robocalls in the US as my project, mostly because it impacts the daily lives of a lot of Americans as well as people across the world. And I realized I knew very little about it, and I wanted to explore different patterns that might arise um, just kind of at an aggregate level. Um, Obviously, it impacts Americans on kind of a one-to-one basis, but whether there's patterns on kind of the bigger view, I was kind of curious to look into a little bit more. I was also interested to look at and kind of explore a project that was working with very large numbers. Um, we're talking kind of in the billions here, so how to kind of contextualize large numbers to show kind of patterns over time was something that I wanted to explore as well in the project. The data itself comes from mostly one source, which is called Umail, which is a robocall prevention service where they put their data up on their website, which can be accessed. It was kind of blocking me from scraping it, but it was mostly just tables, so I was able to copy and paste that um, from the website and just put it into a Google Sheets or an Excel. In terms of cleaning, I did need to do a bit of cleaning after copy and pasting the data. Um, I had to change how the states were called when we're looking at kind of geographic differences, from abbreviations of the state names to actual state names so that I can map it with the kind of map projections I have in the project. I also needed to reformat the data several times so it would work with different kind of visualizations I was working on as well. That was kind of most of the cleaning process. In terms of failures and struggles, I did find D3, which is what I'm working with here, to be quite challenging. Things like the line graph that I have, I had to build that three different times, and it worked on the third time, but was quite difficult, as well as all the other kind of D3 charts I have were difficult as well. Um, and also there was times when I needed to manually reformat the data in an Excel sheet because I didn't quite know how to do it in Python. So that was also kind of a challenge often as well, that kind of lack of skills there. So just in terms of the project, so the headline is the rise and shortfall of robocalls in the US. The data source is exclusively US, that's the focus here. So the volume of robocalls has been growing in the US each year. 2020, however, it told a different story. So there's a scrolly telling piece. At its height this year, robocalls averaged 150 million a day in the US, according to Robocall Prevention Service email, which is at its peak in 2021. So looking at this in a different way, in terms of the line chart, we can see here that there was a peak in 2016 in terms of the volumes that were happening each year. Um, in 2019, sorry, it's been growing since 2016, but it reached its peak in 2019 and then began to fall during COVID. So COVID seemed to have had an impact on robocall and the robocall industry. And 2021 is lower again, but these are obviously based off just year to date figures and we've had like the highest year so far in robocalls this year, so it could look very different looking at it kind of in future. So in terms of 2020, it does look quite different month on month, um, in especially sort of the fluctuations in kind of the early year and then kind of getting growing again towards the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, obviously, COVID started to impact globally and in the West around March sort of time. And this is when they start to make the decline, and it kind of sharpens this decline over the course of the pandemic as lockdowns it becomes more strict. Many workplaces, including call centers, had to close, likely impacting robocalls too. We then had the highest recorded month of robocalls in April 2021, which was most likely capitalizing on the new normal of people being online and targeting people because they are online more and more susceptible to kind of online scamming and things like answering robocalls. There was another decline then just after this in sort of April and May, which was around the time that India had their peak in terms of COVID cases, and India is kind of commonly known as the one of the origins of the most robocalls, according to the source I have here. In terms of volume of calls, it doesn't impact all states evenly. So this kind of color heat map here shows yellow as kind of the fewest, and then the purple as the most robocall volumes across the US. So there are quite kind of disparities between states in America, so it's not all equal. So then taking into account the kind of per capita, the different populations of each state, these red dots represent the per capita view. So the wider the wider the area of the circle is the per capita number. And we can see here that it does kind of mostly impact kind of the coastal states, but also this kind of southeast region here seems to have the highest rate per capita, which is kind of an interesting lens to put on top of the heat map. Then I offer just more kind of resources for anyone that wants to learn more about robocalls. The FCC are investigating it, obviously, with the kind of the sharp peaks that we're seeing in 2021. There's more kind of investigation going into the topic. And then just at the end, I have my methodology that I spoke through earlier. In terms of things I wish I knew, I think a lot of this analysis is quite basic. It's mostly just making comparisons between time and space and geographic space. I think some more kind of complex analysis would be something that would be more interesting. And that is something that I kind of wish that I knew and wish that I could do a bit more of. I think it would also be interesting, kind of off the back of some of the recent lectures on linear regressions, to do sort of a prediction of the years and potentially how many calls per year we can expect in 2022 and 2023 could be kind of an interesting one to layer on top of this as well. But again, I think that's something I'd have to explore in future and something that I don't feel confident in doing right now.